Okay. Well, thanks everybody for showing up. We got a good turnout here. It's a good day for it. And let me just go ahead and talk about how we're going to handle this today. As I sent out several messages, we've got 3 presentations and then some time, actually 4 presentations, sorry, and time for a little bit of discussion if we haven't covered everything after that. So here's how it's going to go. So this is all experimental. You know, I haven't ever done this before. I think people have done maybe things that are somewhat similar. Just a little bit about communication, though. I can't see presenting here the people on the call, whether you have questions or not. So please, when you want to ask a question, just unmute yourself and ask away and just stop me, because I won't be able to tell if you're raising your hand or something like that. So that should work.
Craig, I don't know if everybody else can see this, but on my screen, there's a black square up in the upper right-hand corner.
How about that?
Okay, I don't see it anymore.
Did that change it?
Yes.
Ah, see, I'm learning about this as I go along.
It got kind of bigger for mine.
What I have is a box of the participants in view here. And apparently that blocks whatever I'm showing you on the presentation. So,
Yeah, it goes on top of the presentation.
yeah, okay. I guess that's not going to work. Okay, I was trying to have a look at people raising their hands, but we'll just forego that. Just go ahead and interrupt whenever you want to, and that'll be fine. So it's something new for me, and we'll just have a try at this and see how it works. What I did is curated a number of slides of underwater scenes, and what I want to do is put them up sort of one at a time and encourage comments around the room. And the type of thing that I think we should be trying to do here is sort of act like we're going through our slides ourselves on our computer, and you know, we'd like to share with each other what we see in the slide here and what we think we might do with it in the photo contest. So I guess the first question is, you know, does it even apply to the photo contest? That'll be an interesting topic for discussion to begin with. So let's just go to the first one. And so here it is. And if you can see at the top of the screen, I've in fact, on my screen, it's kind of blocked by the top banner there, but
it's boxed on our screen too.
Yeah, darn. Well, what that's designed to do, folks, is to allow you to remind yourself of the categories. So the categories that we're talking about are grouper, leading lines, negative silhouettes, and single color. And leading lines. I left out leading lines too, sorry. Okay, so those are the groups, the categories. And you know, here's the first slide that I got. And again, these are all anonymous, they're off the internet, and they're not mine, they're not anybody's that you know, I don't believe. But I will say this, these are all photos that people had posted out there for some reason, they were proud of these photos. So maybe they represent professionals, maybe they represent people like me who aren't so professional. So I don't know the origin of all of them, but I can tell you that some of them were from some pretty good photographers and some of them not so good. So anyway, here it is. What do you guys think about this? Does it belong in the contest? What would you say? And just jump in there, whoever's interested.
It's not a grouper.
Definitely not a silhouette.
Yeah, right. Okay.
I think it has good.
Long and thin, perhaps.
Looks like the manta's going to eat the diver.
Okay. Well, I heard Dennis say maybe long and thin.
It's the only thing I could see.
Yeah.
Or wide and thin.
wide and thin. Yeah, doesn't
I
really
mean,
fit.
the actual animal isn't long and thin, but the perspective is.
That's a good point. We'll talk about that a few times, I think, in these slides. I think there's at least an argument that you could consider it for kind of a leading line, because the leading lines, get kind of general. They're not just straight lines. They can be swirls that lead you to certain places. So, but I don't know what anybody thinks about that. I don't think it's a strong leading lines. What else about
I think that regardless of what category it would be in, it's not a very good candidate for a good photo. Obviously, it's confusing. There's a lot of backscatter in there. Color-wise, it's okay, but it is the matte is coming into the frame, which is good. But I think that the fin being at the very tip bothers me a little bit. Those are my comments.
I think
It's
the
funny.
diver's distracting in the background.
Diver,
Yeah.
definitely. So
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
But he does have swim space in front of him, which is good. But I'm like Dennis, that being on that edge just bugs me. If he cropped it, he didn't do a very good job of cropping.
That is so funny, because that's exactly, had that conversation with Betsy last night. I said, technically the animal's not cut off, but does it make you nervous that it's so close?
Yeah, I think that it would also be better if it had been cropped with less of the top left, maybe by about a third, so that the matte is a little bit more centered, but still in the bottom portion of the frame.
Well, so I'm getting from people that this is not a great one for a contest. There's lots of problems with it. If you weren't worried about our photo contest with some other contests, and you could remove the diver, I think it would have more of a chance. But
I actually feel like when you're talking about the leading lines, I really see the nice line through it. And then I get to the diver and the bubble stream, and it completely ruins it.
yeah,
I feel like if that wasn't there, you might see the line and the curve like really nice, but you just can't.
okay.
Bubbles.
Well, let's move on. I've got quite a few of these.
I want to say a couple things real quickly, if I may. This is
Sure,
Dave.
David.
I think the leading line is doing something there. Yes, I agree that the fin tip is way too close to the corner. If that diver was up and toward the left a bit, I think it would work out pretty well. But the place the diver is not working.
Yeah.
And
Okay,
also,
well,
of course, it could have fairly easily cleaned up a lot of that backscatter and improved things.
Yeah, and these, I mean, I'm assuming that some extra processing could be done on these things, and so that's a good point. Let me go ahead and move on. Now here,
One more thing I just want to say. I would judge that more harshly in the advanced category than the novice category. When I was a novice, I would have been very proud of that photo myself. And so, if you're entering a novice category, then hey, that's not a bad photo.
Yeah, that's a question. Does it look like it's in focus to you guys?
No. That was another thing. Yeah, I was afraid of this on the screen, but yeah, when you show it on a big screen, the focus is a little bit off. That's a good point, Tom.
But it's also better visibility than most of the water that I've been in when I see these guys.
Yeah.
I think the next one.
Yeah. So, okay. So here's a quandary. You've got some really good black water photos. You really like to show them. Now, can you get them into the photo contest? So there you go. 2 of them, and we can just talk about both of them at the same time, whatever you think.
Well, they're not groupers.
So I have a question, since I'm going to be new to all this. These strike me as being potential for single color, obviously not the black. Am I correct in thinking that, or is that not what we mean by single color?
As a judge, I would consider this sage to be, especially the I guess that's an eel on the right. I don't know what it is, but I would consider that a single color.
Okay, thank you.
What about the one on the left?
It would be a marginal. I think that the yellows bother me from a standpoint of a single color, but overall, it's the bluish violet looks good.
So this
I'd
is
probably
kind of
accept it.
easy in some way. You could, the left one, you could obviously have a leading lines thing. You could probably talk about long and thin, the question of single color. The one on the right fascinates me because it comes into that question we had before. The creature is obviously a long and thin thing. He's curled around but the image actually is not long and thin.
Well, you're judging the image, not the creature.
To me, that the one on the right with the eel or whatever it is telling a very nice story. I really like that photograph. I think that the cropping, I would do it differently, but otherwise, I like it a lot.
Yeah, but would you say it's long and thin?
Probably not.
Well, on the long and thin question, on the octopus, I would say yes. On the eel, you could not disqualify it from the contest because indeed that animal is long and thin. But
Well, that's what,
judging, you don't have to give it, a lot of points because of the long and thin nature of it.
yeah, but that's exactly what Craig is getting at too, is it's a long and thin subject, but the image is not long and thin. So how do you relate that to a contest that calls for long and thin?
If that's all you got for long and thin, then you use it. If you have other things that are long and thin, I would go with them.
As a judge, and up at the top or what you're judging by, would you say that that's long and thin?
I would give it high marks, but I might dock it a little bit because it doesn't really meet the criteria of a photo with a long and thin subject, even though it is definitely a long and thin animal.
Well, this is what Craig is asking. Do you consider the subject or do you consider just the image because it's a photo contest?
Yeah, what if you have an eel with just his head sticking out of a hole and all you see is his face? Is that long and thin?
You guys are jumping ahead of me, but that's fine.
That's what you're asking though.
Yeah, absolutely.
As a brand new person that hasn't submitted yet, I would go with you're judging it on the photograph,
Exactly.
not the species. Because in that case, you can just say long and thin. You can have a picture of a diver. They're long and thin.
Yeah.
Some of them.
Well, it's possibly long and thin.
Well, some of us aren't quite as long and thin as we used to be.
But
I
here you've got an
resemble that
alternative. You could probably put that in as a single color and be good, right? So
Right.
There's an argument that
Yeah.
can be made.
okay, let's move on. I got a bunch of these, so let's I don't want to cut anybody off, but it's good discussion. So here's one that I put in there again to be kind of provocative. What do you guys think about the category for this thing?
They're not groupers.
Lines, leading lines.
Got some lines in it, yeah. What about
Yeah, I think definitely.
what about that top seal possibly being a silhouette? You do see the top of his face, but I don't know.
I don't think silhouette because you can make out what he is. You're not just seeing the outline of him totally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Barry. I would not classify this as being a very good silhouette.
There's enough color cast in this, you could almost say single color.
Yeah.
I
They need a
definitely
little white
see the
balance.
single color. I think that is maybe the top thing that I would see it as.
I'd probably put it in leading lines.
Okay, I'm just gonna say, I don't really care for the photo overall because it's kind of in that in-between zone of being an illuminated photo and being a silhouette. And it's just not quite as appealing. If it had more light on those sea lions, then it'd be great. Or if it had more silhouetting by getting a little lower possibly and shooting up more, it would probably be great. But in the zone it's in right now, I'm not a big fan.
I agree.
I love the dynamic and the movement in the photo, with the guy looking
Yeah,
back
I love
down
the
at,
story. I really like the story. And I think that there's an argument to said that it's got strong leading lines because everything is pushing me to that top seal with the whatever it's got in its mouth. So there's action, there's a story, there's leading lines. As a photo, it could be better, but the story is strong.
Okay.
The
Anything?
light rays make nice lines coming down, but it needs to be white balanced and get rid of the overall cast it has in it. The lighting's just kind of a lot of cyan in the picture.
Agree.
Yeah, yeah. Let's look now at this one.
Well, it does have a grouper.
Yes, finally.
Well, I didn't put many grouper in here because you know
Done. It's a grouper.
that's the next category. So I figured everybody's pretty well set on that one.
I
to
think
start
it's
with.
a winner. It's grouper.
I'm sure everybody's seen fish butt like that when you're shooting too.
Well, you know, here's what I wanted to. I've looked at this a bit, you know, and I think there's at least an argument to be made for the leading lines on this one too, with the fan, you know, angling off to kind of the different corners, and that sponge has a nice shape to it. And but here's the question I posed on this thing. So somebody already said it. Look, that's a typical fish butt, you know. But this is a photo from a professional photographer whose you know, logo I've blurred out in the bottom there. So I'm just wondering, you know, you do see the eye, and it leads me to believe that the grouper is not the subject of this thing. The subject is the fans and the sponge, and you know. So what do people think about that?
I think it's excellent, lit very well lit.
Yeah, I agree that it's really strong for the leading lines. The coral branching is gorgeous, and it's like your typical like awesome coral branch. And the grouper is really just an added pop of color. It's not the grouper.
If the grouper was the emphasis of the shot, it should be cropped to just be the sponge and the grouper. So to me, the leading lines are definitely what's striking about it. With
Yeah,
the
if
line.
this is a if this is a professional and he's pushing this out here as an example of his work, I'm not impressed.
I don't know how professional. They're professional enough to put a watermark on. We all know that's pretty easy to do. So
Yeah, but what if it was a photo showing wide angle lighting?
yeah.
You say it's
If we're
excellent.
going for the reef scene, I think it's a good shot. If it's trying to be entered into a grouper category, it's not doing a good job.
Yep.
Right.
Okay. Good. Let's move on. Here we go.
Grouper.
Not grouper.
Definitely long and thin.
And leading lines
Yes.
Yeah, it fits better in a diagonal category.
and single color.
That's a more challenging shot to take without getting it blown out.
Yeah.
Yeah, they did a good job. I think it's a good photo.
The only thing you might not be able to see on your screen, I don't know how good the resolution is. It's got quite a bit of noise down in the blue part there.
Yes, it does.
So is that the kind of thing that you would try to fix for our photo contest, or would that just be part of maybe having a high ISO shot, you know, natural light, and you know, what do people think about that?
It'd be very, very difficult to fix that.
I don't see it first off. I don't really see it until you say to look at it
Yeah, my eyes
Correct.
didn't go to that part of the screen.
at all.
Correct.
Yeah, it doesn't
Right.
bother me too much, but I noticed it. Things like that do bother me in my photos, but when I see it in others, it maybe doesn't bother me quite as much.
Well, if you were going to do a leading lines, I see that all the fish kind of leading you to that corner. I mean, the leading line should be leading you to a focus point, and that would be the lower left.
Yeah, and I think that the focus point here is just about at the 1/3 point. To me, my eyes tend to wander over to the point where the 1/3 in the bottom left.
Okay. What about the pink cast in the sunlight? Should he have done a little bit better job on white balance here, or is that just my eyes?
It's sunset.
You might be
Okay.
blowing it out a little bit. There's
Yeah.
nothing to work with on there. Mine
Yeah,
is not
maybe.
pink all the way though. I mean, it's like I could see it when he said it kind of, but it doesn't seem real pink.
Yeah, yeah, it's,
About-
yeah.
I think it's screen dependent. Mine is more like a very, very light peach.
Okay, let's go to the next one.
Hmm.
It looks like it's been photoshopped.
Got a pretty heavy vignette on it, maybe. I don't.
What
I
is
put,
it?
It's a trumpet fish or a trombone fish or something like that.
No, it's a ghost pipefish.
It's a ghost pipefish.
Pipefish
Yeah,
looks like.
it is.
I don't like it because when you can't tell what it is, that's a problem. You know, the angle they shot it at, maybe they're trying to be creative. But then it's too confusing to what you're looking at. And so I'm not a big fan.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not
Unusual
a big
behavior
fan.
shot for them too.
Yeah,
You
mine.
another
almost
one of-
normally always see them straight up and down almost.
I think it's another one of these photographs that we all have plenty of. It's a great subject, but it's not a very good photograph.
Yeah, where I missed it for me is maybe if I'd been able to find the eye, you know, the eye's well in focus, but it just doesn't stick out. So.
Real shallow depth of field too makes it really pop out.
Yeah. Okay. How about this one?
I wish it was mine.
Can this be
Yeah.
single color because the subjects are single color, even though the
Sure.
photo is not?
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely single color.
Way
I
over-
think that they fell in love with their sliders. Needs to back off on the intensity of the color.
See, that's what bothers me the most. It's just-
The color and the overexposed foreground, that white is just really distracting.
Yes.
And then there's a little bit of snowfall in the background too.
Yep. And he's cut the tails off of the fish and so on. Okay.
Oh, Jim. That's a glitch.
Snooted. Did not quite get the whole face, but he got the eye good centered.
Great shot, but it doesn't there's no category for it. Well, it's single color, single
Yeah.
color.
Single color, yeah. I like the moodiness of it, but I do have a problem with the mouth being cut off, it looks like. Maybe a little too dark and moody, but you know, it's interesting. And I think the bottom could have cropped up a little more because that sandy bottom doesn't do anything for the photo.
Are y'all saying that because it's a black shot, a black water shot, that it's single color no matter what the subject's coloration is?
No, because all tones are purple, so I call that a single color.
It's not really
Okay,
black
good.
water
The
either. It's
subject.
just been shot with a snoot.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with the
Yeah.
sand on the bottom, David. From my standpoint, I think it helps ground the subject.
Yeah, I wouldn't crop it all the way out. I just pull it up a little bit to where the lightness is maybe.
Yeah.
Is there any argument here for reverse silhouetting?
I
Don't
think
know.
that's the thing. That's called a strobe illuminated photo. If it's reverse silhouette.
I mean, it
They-
looks
they-
like a silhouette, but it's not. And
Yeah. They
otherwise,
could-
it's hard to categorize it.
They could
Yeah,
have
I don't think
backlit it.
so.
They could have backlit the fish, but the strobe, the snoot might overcome that backlit, but it might bring out the fins and all the apparatus off, all the apertures off the fish maybe more.
I think it's very nice. I think that he needs to bring up the brightness on the left with us.
I think what he was trying to do is get a very moody picture with just that eye part of the fish illuminated, which he did. But basically, our group seems to not like that too much. So
I think that he just barely missed having a great shot.
I agree.
Yep.
I think it's really close.
okay, let's move on to this one.
Overexposed.
Looked very noisy, and I don't know if that's backscatter noise or what it is, but it's not real.
Not in focus.
Not a grouper.
Some of it is like that guy who's looking you right in the face, right at
Yeah,
the
right here, yeah.
yeah.
You need to get them going in the same direction.
Well,
That-
so
that-
again, I take all your comments, and
Yeah.
I felt many of them myself, but again, this is a professional guy, with some pretty good photos out there. So I wondered about the noise thing,
I like the photo, but I think that the color cast to it bothers me. I think that it isn't well color graded. It's got too much yellow, and I don't know. The purplish water bothers me, and the yellow cast of the fish, yellowish green cast of the fish bothers me.
So what I would
Definitely
say
purple.
about that is, and just think about this. We don't have to belabor it, but I think this guy's going for art more than just cataloging fish and making it look like what he saw in the water. In particular, he's a professional guy, so this noise cast all around it is not an accident. So I'm just putting it out there. It sounds like our judging generally would not welcome kind of artistic.
I think this photo would look really good on a wall for kind of interior decorating purposes, maybe not photo contest purposes, because it's a little bit almost abstract, and the competition's kind of nice. It's like easy on the eye, and maybe that color scheme would go with where you're trying to go in the room that you're decorating.
Yeah, I can go with that, Jody.
I think he's trying to sell this thing. I think that's for sure. So anyway,
I have a question, Dennis. The noise in the lower right, lower left, that's from enhancing the photo, isn't it? More so than anything else.
There are a lot of ways that could happen. I don't really understand what he did to bring that out. It may have been a very underexposed photo to begin with, and he just brought it up.
Exactly.
And
I think it was artificial. It was enhanced too much.
But it's easy to remove that stuff if he wanted to.
No, I'm saying I think it was created to get his lighting on his fish in the proper place.
Interesting.
Yeah,
okay.
That looks to me like it is a photo that was underexposed. It was brought up.
But do you think he did it on purpose or just screwed up?
I think he did it worse, made it worse. Oh well.
I'm not a fan.
Okay.
I like.
No butt shots, right?
No, that's okay. I mean, butt shots.
Okay.
Okay.
Not a hard
Exception to the butt shot. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's not, it can be a butt shot, but really the subject here is the tail fins. And there's a lot of action in here. There's good composition. No, I have no problems with this as being a very nice shot. Compositionally, technically.
Okay,
good
what does
photo.
anybody else think?
I like
The
it.
lines from the bubbles coming down brings you right into that fin.
I love it. Yeah.
The swirl.
Yeah, it shows
I feel
some
like
action and the strength of the whale, but that water and bubbles being dragged down.
I do feel like it could be considered in long lines. I'm sorry, long and thin.
But definitely leading lines as well.
Sure.
Yeah. Single
I
color,
want to
maybe?
be in the water with that creature.
Single color also.
I don't think it's long and thin because it's long, but it's not thin.
And it's the image too. The image is not long and thin. So according to Tom's point. So anyway, but we could get it in there on leading lines for sure.
Well, I don't think you were going to catch up with it. That's for sure. Wow, look at that.
It looks very sparkly. I think it's not 100% single color, but it's pretty darn close. So if I was judging, I would, let it ride with single color personally.
Yeah.
I think it's a striking photo.
I really like the shot. Yeah, you've got the focus going back toward the upper left, where it's a little out of focus to the lower right, but the creature is on my screen looks perfectly in focus.
Well, it doesn't on mine. So I was going to ask, where's the focus point on it? The legs look like they're in focus, more so than the eyes.
Yeah, this is a good example for bokeh.
Yeah, I agree. I think the focus point on my screen here is at the upper left with that polyp shooting up to the left. So probably he missed the focus on the eyeballs a little bit.
Exactly.
I think Tom's right.
Yeah,
Yeah, the red.
still a striking photo.
Well, I'll go direct to his eye, that's for sure.
Yeah, no one really jumped in too much. One of my pet peeves is typically shooting down the fish, and it's obviously shooting down. The color cast seems off. I'm on my laptop, not on my big computer at home, so it's hard to tell, but from what I see, the eyeball is not really tack sharp.
No, it's not. The focus is a little bit in front of him on those grains on the board. I put this in there just, it's kind of like a warning to myself because I think I really tend to do this, which is I love a subject so much, I want the photo to work because this is a really interesting subject, And
Well, the strobe
so,
positioning is not ideal either. He should have had the strobe on the left instead of on the right.
so, this is one of those things. Yeah. Okay. But yeah,
Didn't leave too much swim space either.
no.
On the wrong way. Maybe. What is it?
No.
This is again, it's one of those angles that's really hard to tell what it is. I'm not sure if it's a type of squid or octopus because you really can't see the eyes, and the arms are kind of impeding because their arms are coming right toward the lens, so they're just an out of focus blob. So those are some issues I have with it. But the exposure is good. The black background's clean, so that's a plus.
More of an abstract than it is a photograph.
Does anybody find a category they think they could really put it in though?
No.
Yeah, I think
Not really.
I think you save that one for some other category.
Or not.
Or not, yeah.
Well, it's either a black crinoid or it's a silhouette. I think it's a black crinoid.
I guess if you wanted to try for single color with an all black crinoid, that's the only thing you got there.
Could be leading lines too, I think maybe, but
The color's off on it.
it's just not a very good photo. Maybe you can't tell the crinoid's a little bit soft focus, so you can see the focus is on the little sponges down here that are slightly in front of the crinoid. And yeah, it's not very good, not a very pretty piece of coral down here either.
It
Looks
looked
like they really
it's
jumped
all
on the
natural
ace.
light, or the flash was way too far away.
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
Definitely single color.
Well, there's
Very abstract.
there's some lines that kind of go across the thing, but I'm just curious about this. I really like it myself.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good single
I'm
color.
happy with it.
Too
Yeah,
sharp.
it's a cool crab. I like it.
But would it be a prize-winning photo?
I don't know. I would like to see it maybe on the thirds, up or down, to see how that would look different and see what kind of patterns are in the background. I don't know if it's on a sponge or what that thing is on.
It's really tiny little guy. I don't know what it is either.
I could see it
Way,
as a
way too
horizontal.
centered. Horizontal would have been a better shot probably. If you had picked up a little bit more what's to the left coming to him, but that's way too centered, I think.
Yeah, it's just plunked right in the center of the screen. So yeah.
Single color.
Single color.
The single color, it looks a little oversaturated on my screen.
Yep.
I think he had a filter on his snoot.
I don't know.
Something like that.
There were no notes.
It looks
on
awful red, doesn't it?
It
mean,
does.
even on
Yeah,
the
it doesn't
ground
look
around
very
it.
doesn't look very sharp either.
Was not particularly sharp. That could just be the resolution of where I picked it up from, though.
Could be.
I'm guessing it is sharp if you had the original.
Lines.
Yeah, absolutely leading lines.
To the point you made earlier about shooting down, this would have been a much lovelier shot if it had been shot shooting up.
Yes, but I think it still works. I think that the negative space in the top, putting it in the bottom center, and there is a little bit of motion towards the bottom right, which appeals to me. I'm looking for just a little bit more negative space on the left. My eye keeps going over there and saying, well, I wish there was a little more space over there.
I find it kind of odd. This rhinophore, you don't really see his face. This one's real sharp. The other one is kind of going off into the background. The thing that bothers me the most is just this stuff down here in the bottom in front of him is really distracting to me.
No,
Yeah,
I think
I
it's
agree
okay.
with that, Craig. That's the first thing I noticed with all that algae or whatever it is, just kind of in the way of the photo. Unfortunately, that's real life, but it is distracting. And I also, if I'm shooting more face on nudibranch, it's really a challenge to try to get both those rhinophores in focus.
Yeah.
But I try to do so. If I'm shooting straight more to the side, then I'll obviously have to let that far one go out of focus.
Yeah.
This is kind of an in-between zone where it's not quite profile, it's not quite face on. So
yeah,
the challenge.
I like the limited depth of field there because it shows depth going back into the background with the tentacles or whatever they are.
I think on this macro, you probably don't have much choice in that matter. So yeah, it's good. But
some people shoot F-32.
Oh, that's a little shrimp. I don't have any of those. Is that what that is?
Yeah. It's a hairy shrimp with eggs. Yeah.
Holy cow.
That's
Where are the eggs?
cool, but unfortunately, I don't like that it's all the way to the right side.
The eggs are right here. Can you see my cursor?
Yes, okay. Thank you.
I've seen quite a few of this hairy shrimp, and this is one of the best I've ever seen. They're extremely difficult. I mean, I haven't seen them with my own eyes. I've seen photographs of them, and this is one of the better photographs.
I've never seen a green one.
Yeah. I've tried to photograph them and gotten a couple of decent shots. I would say just decent, but you probably can't tell it. I think this is probably overcropped, and you have to overcrop because these things are about the size of a pencil eraser.
Smaller.
Smaller, even just they look like a little piece of fluff, you know. But I think this is another one. Oh, I'm in love with this creature, kind of. And even though the focus is soft, you know, I'm going to do it. And so, yeah, as much as I would love to put in a photo like that, I think the judges would probably.
Yeah, I know that the environment is what it is, but it does look a bit junky to me. It's just, it bothers me a little bit that there's so much trash around.
Backscatter, you could have taken that out.
I'm not sure if that was backscatter, if that was the legs.
No, it's some kind of crinoid or something. It's not on the shrimp. It's not part of the shrimp. Getting close to the end. I'll try to.
Like here, there's too much flash on the right and not enough on the face on the left side.
And crowding the left side of the screen.
Yep.
I agree, Barry.
It's just kind of a fish catalog shot in a way. He didn't go for the full face. He didn't go for the full fish. He's kind of got half of him. He's just got him sitting there across the screen. Nothing very interesting about it.
A novice would be happy.
Yeah. This is for you, Dennis.
Well, isn't that interesting?
Our favorite
Whatever
creature.
the hell. I think it's a sea cucumber, is it?
Oh, that's on the left.
On the little shrimp.
Right. On the left-hand side. Right here.
Oh my God, I see him now.
Dennis, we were photographing these out in Rajanpat, trying to.
Yeah, but they weren't red.
Maybe squat lobsters?
No.
Really tiny ones?
He's
Yeah, I couldn't see it
It's a
either.
shrimp.
Not crinoid, but a
shrimp.
whip coral shrimp.
Yeah.
He's a shrimp, but
Whip coral, isn't it?
I don't know.
I don't think it's a wild coral, or I don't know.
I don't know what it is exactly. I've only seen him.
It's straight vertical. I'd like to see diagonals.
Yeah, I just think it's not a great subject because Dennis and I both tried to photograph a couple of these.
I can't,
He got the-
I couldn't get a sharp picture even when everything around it was sharp. It was like he
Yeah,
came pre-unsharped.
yeah.
It's
But
just
you can
fuzzy.
see this is focused well. If you look up like the little fins and stuff up here, it's pretty darn sharp, you know. And down here on his back, looks like a sponge kind of thing, camouflage.
Yeah, they're just naturally fuzzy.
Yeah, it's kind of like an orangutan crab.
Yeah.
Oh, hi, Lou.
Hi.
Welcome. Single
Leading
color
lines.
lines.
Yeah, single color for sure.
That's just a nice photo. I don't know if you can see the face, but the rhinophores are really well imaged and every kind of hanging out in front. But, let me go on to a couple more before I turn it over to David.
Very nice.
Yeah, it's nice. I would like to see a little more light on the left, maybe on the face area.
Well, and it doesn't seem to be in focus to me either.
It seems a little.
I think it's okay.
It's a little bit soft, but yeah.
May just be the resolution of what Craig was able to get.
Yeah. I'm confused by the lighting too. I mean, when I saw this, I thought it was beautiful and all that, but then I figured, you know, I bet there's photoshopping going on here that would not be legal in our contest. In fact, if you look up here very closely, you can kind of see where maybe they had a mask on it, and the mask
Maybe they just over sharpened it.
quite, you know, there. So anyway,
That's that chromatic dispersion, isn't it, Dennis?
And no, that would be on the extremities. You get chromatic dispersion or aspiration. You don't see it in the center.
Chromatic aberration. No, this one looks like a masking thing to me. You know, if you look here, just a little bit light right around there and light around the other rhinophore as well. So I don't know. It's just something that made me wonder.
That's nice.
Single color.
Lions.
Line, yeah, leading lines as well.
And I like the movement in it.
Yeah, good motion.
Yeah, your eye can't go anywhere but right into the center. The background is a nice off color, but it's not, there's very few distracting elements in here. The green up at the top, maybe a little bit, but otherwise the photograph holds together very nicely. It's a great worm.
I think it's a really good single color because the subject for sure is just strikingly different shades of the same green.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
This could be in multiple categories.
No grouper.
But not a grouper.
Without a grouper.
There's your long and thin.
There's a couple of
Single
things
color,
on my
maybe.
There's a couple of things on my screen here that I don't see on the regular photo. You see this little white thing here above his nose? Do you guys see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, we see it.
That's not on the original photo. I don't know where that came from. Kind of weird. But yeah, without these pieces of junk in there that somehow crept in there, I think this is a photo we'd all love to take. And I just had one more to kind of, it's something on my screen that is showing there. I don't know. Maybe I drew on the screen or something. You know, that's possible.
Might be on your laptop.
No, I think you. Well, that's good enough. I've taken more than my share of time, and thanks to everybody for being so free with their thoughts and comments. And we'll keep it up. Let me stop sharing. And Dennis, are you ready to? I mean, David, are you ready to go?
Yes, I am.
Great job, Craig. I really enjoyed the conversation around all these shots.
Well, thanks. So did I. I was hoping,
Okay.
but I wasn't really worried because this group never has a problem speaking up and talking. So, you know.
All right, can y'all hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right, so we're gonna talk about leading lines. It's gonna be fairly quick, I hope. Is there a black box up there on the right corner blocking the last of the word or the letter E?
No.
Okay, I'll get rid of it anyways, I don't know. Anyways, okay, so leading lines. Basically, leading lines are lines in a photo that have been positioned by the photographer or just by sheer luck to draw the viewer's eye either toward a specific subject or just to draw the eye through the photo to make some travel and movement through the frame. Okay, why is my slide not advancing? There we go. So as photographers, we can use leading lines to create depth by positioning a strong line leading from the foreground to the background, off in the distance, to create visual movement from one portion of your image to another, to give prominence to subjects by placing them where leading lines converge, or create a circular motion where the viewer eyes travel around the frame without ever exiting the frame. In a moment here, we're going to look at a lot of different examples. So basically, leading lines are going to give the viewer's eye a pathway to travel along inside your image. They'll create visual flow, and they can be used to emphasize a focal point. Okay, so this is kind of a stereotypical leading line image. This is in Iceland. You got the little road going up to the farmhouse. So your eye, can't help but kind of follow that pathway up to that farmhouse. And then you also have the lines coming down from the top of the hillside there. Again, flowing back down toward the farmhouse and the farm buildings. Again, very simple composition. That line of the boat trail leading right to the boat there. You'll see a lot of my things are on diagonals when I can do diagonals because I prefer diagonals when possible. Again, stereotypical leading line images here. This is a dock or a pier leading, to the subjects there, my daughter and her friend, and then off into the far distance. Again, the wall here along the water's edge, your eye, will follow that, pick up the subjects of the fishermen, and then off into the distance. So by having the line go off into the distance, in both like these last two photos, it's creating a depth. So your image is not quite so flat and two-dimensional. Oh, I didn't mention, I'm starting out with pictures on land because I think it's easier to start conveying the knowledge with these pictures than it is underwater because we have less to work with underwater, which we're going to talk about in a moment. Again, the leading lines of the edge, the bottom of the walls, where they intersect with the floor, and of course the little lines on the floor, all leading out to the photographer photographing that temple there. Again, leading lines, the subject here is on the main horizontal line. And again, on land, a lot of times you really can't shoot diagonally, but a lot of times you can position lines in your image so they are diagonally in the frame. And
David,
so,
I have a question, David.
Yes.
Are these all your photos?
Yes.
Man, these are really good.
Well, thank you. A lot of these are from different travels. This is in the airport in Beijing right here. But again, so he's on the leading line, that primary line that's going diagonally horizontal there on the floor, and also intersecting with those columns coming down, the orange, the bright color there. On the left here, we have these major lines coming in, and then they intersect here and, coming in this way as well. And then you can travel up right here to the, really the primary subject of the photo. And then on this little child, you have the line here that's drawing right to her head. And then you have this line here that kind of gives you a boundary to travel up and down that goes right along the side of her face.
Yeah, that's what I would call blocking lines.
Yeah. It basically limits you. You're traveling up and down that, and it's kind of limits you from going further to the left. Here are two daughters on a petrified log. And again, you have the log. And again, it's kind of placed diagonally because it looks a little more dynamic that way, in my opinion. But your eye just sort of travels up and down that, and find the subject there. And then you can also move off into the distance.
Now, on that picture, are you kneeling down as you're taking it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty big log. It's probably like 3 foot diameter or maybe more. So I'm lower, yes.
Yeah,
I get
because,
real low.
and that's a good perspective that you're not shooting down on it. But
Yeah, and when there's a nice sky, I always try to, shoot at an angle to include the pretty sky and the white puffy clouds.
Yeah, it looks like a fisheye or a very
Yeah.
wide angle.
Why-
It is a fisheye, and I shot a lot that day. It's a
Yeah.
10.5 fisheye, Nikon. Again, similar kind of situation as we had a few moments ago, the line here and here drawing in to the center, to the temple of heaven, which is the primary subject. Again, leading lines is, converging, leading off into the distance, drawing your eye out here to the little building at the end of the dock and the mountains and volcanoes in the distance. I think this one I reversed actually. I was going to talk a little bit about, since we read from left to right, when we view photos, now I've never personally done testing on this, but they say that your eye tends to travel around the photo from left to right. And so I believe this photo is actually reversed. If anybody reads Mandarin, you can confirm that. But I think I flipped it so that the eye is traveling down this to the primary subject, which is the guard here. This is at Mao Zedong's house in China. And this is kind of a little different. I'm getting to a little area here where we're talking about not really a line, but all these things together make the lines form, okay? And this is one of those situations where your eye is spinning around and just drawn right into the center, okay? So this is what's an implied line. So, lines in photos can be actual lines, like a hard line, or an implied line. Implied lines are lines suggested by changes in texture, tone, color, or by repeating shapes that sort of together make a line. So here it's just a very slight, just a little bit change in texture and color, creating lines that can lead to the ladybug, and also sort of give the ladybug you can visualize a path. The ladybug can move along these lines down into the photo.
was that taken at Enchanted Gardens?
As a matter of fact, yeah, probably one of our little HUPS outings we did there years ago with my little sprayer Mr. water bottle.
Yep.
To bring your own water droplets. Again, implied lines, there's not actually a line, but all the tombstones draw your eye to the subject, which is the tree. Okay, does that make sense? And again, implied lines, all these little statues together, draw your eye in up to the temple at the foreground of the photo. And again, just these bags in a row, they create a line. Again, placed on a diagonal fashion, even though it's on land and you can't flip things diagonally a lot of times. But by getting in a particular position, you can create the vision and feeling of a diagonal line. And lastly, I think that's the last one on topside stuff. These are a bunch of paddle boats together. And again, they make a line. I thought it was kind of a nice abstract image with the horizontal line. Horizontal lines in the image are considered like calming, peaceful. And it kind of looks that way, especially with the calm surface of the water.
Nice.
So on land, go ahead.
No, this is Lou. I'm Dennis's friend. That was very, very nice. Reminds me of a watercolor. I'm enjoying your presentation.
Oh, thank you. So thank you very much, Lou. On land, it's fairly simple. We have roads, trails, bridges, rivers. I'm not going to read the whole list, but there are a lot of things that you can incorporate as leading lines in your images. So when you're on land and sightseeing somewhere or whatever, keep these things in mind and try to, put those leading lines in your frames when you're photographing or shooting video. Underwater is not quite so easy because there are very few man-made straight lines underwater. Sight distance is limited underwater due to visibility, so you can't do a lot of this where you're fading off into the distance kind of lines. And then also depth of field when you're shooting macro can be very challenging to create, more longer type leading lines. So we're going to look at some situations and subjects that fare well underwater for utilizing leading lines. And they're not, the list I'm giving you is not limited to just these things, and just to give you some ideas and some food for thought, what you can do in your images. So again, there are sometimes underwater when you have man-made structures that offer good leading lines. This is that shipwreck in Cozumel, and obviously the leading lines leading up to that hatch exiting the boat up there. And then, you know, a lot of the sea life, you know, sponges and things like that can provide leading lines. You know, these sponges are all pointing at my daughter, who's, I guess I would say, the primary subject. She likes to be the subject of photos, so that would make her happy. Oh, here she is again. What do you know? Again, sea whips. I love sea whips. Anytime I see them macro or wide angle, I always shoot them because I think they're a very pretty subject. But again, they're all pointing there at my daughter, Maya. Like I said, sea whips are just a great subject. And here's a long and thin. We're talking about photo subjects. But,
I have one comment.
Sure.
Wow.
Yeah. And again, this I don't think would be nearly as exciting if you had it going straight horizontal across the frame. It just looks more interesting by placing it on diagonal. And again, the lines, you know, here are just causing you to move. You're a lot of action, a lot of movement in the frame.
Now, like on that one, you can crop it in such a way that you crop it diagonally, even if you
a lot of
click
times, yes, sure. If you have the space to crop and spin it in your crop, you can definitely do that to add that factor to it.
Okay, I have a question. Okay,
Yes.
it's a beautiful picture, and the eye is perfectly in focus, but his mouth is not. Does that bother you or not?
Yeah, it does bother me some, and I'll show some other photos later where I work real hard to try to get most of that subject in focus. But the eye is really the critical thing, and that's where you usually go to first.
You do.
Yeah,
Yes.
if I have that mouth in focus too, that would be gravy. The mouth kind of fades out on this one in general. I think the lighting is not so great on it and stuff. This is actually, I think, a pretty old photo I have. I'm not sure what trip it's from, but it's maybe as old as 10 years ago.
Well, one thing for me, if I may, the eye's in focus, but also as you travel to the upper right from the eye, you still find the scales in focus. So to me, that kind of led me in that direction.
Okay, well, good. I'm glad you went that right way.
But back, on the judging aspect, though, how much would you dock, or would you even consider the fact that the mouth is not in focus?
Personally, I would dock some, but I first would look at the eye. If the eye's not in focus, I'm definitely docking. But if the other critical parts of it are not in focus, like, and the mouth would be more critical than the back or lower, you know, the further down toward the tail portion of it.
I really like the narrow depth of field on it. I wouldn't have docked it off hardly at all for the lack of sharpness on the snout. I really, really like the change between very sharp to unsharp in this image. I like it. It gives it variety. It helps to focus my image. My eye goes right to his eye.
Oh yeah.
But everything else.
And you know, something else that, you know, a lot of times people say, oh, I don't want to have it centered. And yes, the eye is centered. And sometimes I think by centering the subject, you're making a little bit of a statement, more artistic, abstract kind of statement. And so a lot of times I will shoot subjects if I can within dead centered. And also I'll shoot them with them on the thirds. If it's something that's more stationary, like earlier, that crab photo, that white crab on the white background. But this one, you know, he's buried inside the sea whip. That's why you got these foreground subjects or foreground portions of the sea whip that are really out of focus. And it just shows like he's hiding inside there, basically.
The little starlet polyps on it, though, coming in and out of focus is really, really interesting.
Yeah,
like, I like that there's some in and some out, and they change.
That was very compelling to me too, because the upper left, the polyps are in focus. Upper right, they're in focus. The eyes in focus. So it's like the shot's going in and out of focus. It's really intriguing.
All right.
I think it works
with
the eye in the center. Really worked on that one.
What was that?
I said the eye being in the center really worked for me on that one.
Like I said, sometimes it works.
The shallow depth of field was really nice.
Yeah. And this is another one I dead centered it. You know, and again, the sea whips, anytime I have the sea whips, if I'm shooting a macro lens, I will look around the sea whips for some kind of photo subjects in there, little fish or what have you. But again, the background, that sea whip always makes a pretty background.
Yeah, the in your face type of perspective of the fish is also gives it dynamic. I would say it just gives it a dynamic feel.
Yeah. So anyways, here's my other daughter. This is in Grenada a few years ago. And this was a dye, the visibility was real bad and we weren't seeing a whole lot. And I saw this pretty red spun. So I had her get in position over here to photograph her. And, the sponge is obviously pointing up toward her, and she's kind of framed in that little spot of the L shape in the sponge. So I just thought, it fit really well with the diver in that spot. But then sometimes underwater, she wants to take pictures of me. So this one, she actually said, give me your camera, I'm gonna take a picture of you. And I'm just gonna show you the difference by getting low and close. You think the sponge is giant and that feather duster and the sponge is giant, but in reality, they're not that big. But the fact that I was very low and very close, it made them look really big, right? Mm-hmm. And so this is my daughter taking the photo, even though I told her like 10 times, get closer, get closer. This is where we ended up. But, this is bonus information for our class. Nothing to do with leading lines, but it's a really big difference, especially if you're shooting with a fisheye lens, for example. That fisheye distortion, when you get real close to things, it makes them really large. And so it can really make a big difference in your photos by getting closer. Got it?
Got it.
Okay, so when you're low and looking up, a lot of times you can find subjects with silhouettes with the sunbeams. And sunbeams are a great leading line. Everything's drawn right into the center. And if you put your subject in front of that sun, it makes the sunball a lot more pleasing in your photo than having that sunball out and exposed open, because it's overpowering a lot of times. But by putting your subject in front of it, it tones that down. And all those lines from those sun rays all draw you right to that subject.
David, what is your feeling about the diver in the bottom right?
I would have liked to have had more light on them, but it is what it is. And I didn't take it out. I don't do much Photoshop stuff. I just use Lightroom. And so it is what it is. And like I said, if I had more light behind it, so you could see the diver silhouette as well, I'd be happier with it. But that's where we are. So this is the silhouettes kind of photo contest. I'm just going to say a little bit about shooting sun rays. A funny story, years ago, we were in Wakatobi and my buddy came up from a dive and he goes, yeah, I was concentrating on shooting sunbeams on that dive. And I'm like, I didn't see any sunbeams. I go, were there sunbeams? He goes, no, but I shot at a fast shutter speed to make them. And I'm like, that's not how it works. Okay. You have to see the sunbeams that are present. And usually when you have a calmer surface and maybe later in the afternoon or like mid-morning times are good times to do that. But if you have a rough surface, it moves those sunbeams, reflects them around too much. And so you don't get those sun rays like that. But if the surface is calmer, that's when you can get these sun rays. And you can freeze them by shooting at a faster shutter speed, like a minimum of 1/125th probably. But faster the better to freeze those sunbeams. Here's an example of a line, this, I think it's some type of coral. The line travels around and no matter which way you kind of travel it, you're going to go by the primary subject, the fish. So it just kind of leads you around and you're always catching that fish as your eye's moving around. The lionfish is, I like shooting them face on because they kind of frame themselves and all the leading lines they carry around with them to lead you right toward their face. Okay. When you shoot them from the side, then you got these big tips of these fins sticking out and kind of distracting and stuff. But I like shooting them flat on from the face on if possible. But like I said, the lines tend to lead right into their face. And again, this is on a C-pin, a little fish here, and your eye moves up and down the primary line diagonally here. And also you have all these little reinforcing lines coming into the subject as well. And again, diagonals. I like diagonals. Oh, diagonal again. So here we are again. We get the diagonal, we got the line. Our eye's going to travel up and down this. And, the subject is obviously right there. And this one's dead center. I could have put it up a little higher, a little lower, but I kind of just liked it right there in the middle on this one. And here we got a little triple fin, I think, maybe. And again, this is like these things, I try to really shoot them flat so you get focus all the way from here to here. Because if you shoot it more at an angle, like closer to this side than to that side, then you're going to get some parts in focus and then the focus is going to fade off. So I personally like getting most of the creature in focus that I can. This is a little bit at an angle, so the tail's starting to get soft back here. But,
I think that one of the Blenny on the go back. If I think that one right there, if I was shooting it more diagonally towards him with a narrower depth of field, where I just had his eyes and a portion of the C-pen, I think it would also be a very effective photograph as it receded off into the distance.
Yeah, you can do either way. You know, like I said, I just kind of tend to prefer to have a lot of it in focus. But you know, this one's fine. The tail does get a little soft, but I'm totally fine with that. And if you want to
This
shoot,
picture,
go ahead.
this picture is almost more about the sea pen. I mean, the fish is there and he's cool, but to me, it's a lot about the sea pen.
Yeah, yeah, it makes a very pretty subject. Anytime you see something like that, and again, these are the examples. You know, Dennis is going to talk about negative space. When I see a pretty sea pen, I'm going to go look on it specifically to find something on it that I can shoot to have that sea pen in the background. So it's just looking for things like that. Why is my picture? Here we go. So again, I like to shoot so I can get as much of it in focus as I possibly can most of the time. And it's not easy when you see the wire coral is moving back and forth in the current and stuff. So it takes some work to do that. And again, these are, you know, when you're doing macro and the crinoids, it's good for leading lines because you got the main arm and you got all these little appendages that all can point toward your subject.
Single color.
Oh yeah, this is pretty monochromatic as well. That's the actual color of the photo. It's black and white.
Sure.
It wasn't a conversion of black and white. Oh, that was just my reminder to talk about diagonals, but I've done that a lot already, so I won't say anything else. So on land, we talked about implied lines where you have things that are together that kind of make a visual line. And that's an example here. All these little fish, these surging fish together, kind of make a visual line leading you through the photo. And
Hey,
again,
David, back on that last one.
Yes.
There, the lines in the up there in the sea itself are leading me down into that as well.
This here, this stuff?
Yeah, there and also to the right.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought about talking about Snell's window, which is kind of this thing is starting to see right here, but I decided not to with some other photos. So again, here you kind of got an implied line with this school of fish moving through the frame. It just seemed to create some motion. If you took those fish out or just had a couple spattered around, I don't think you'd have that feeling of motion in the photo. And then again, you kind of have the lines here, just the more packed fish creating some movement through your frame. And the lines are not always really visible from the angle you see them at initially. Okay, so this is a starfish, this is Justin Cozumel, and shooting straight down on a starfish, this is what you see, the pattern, okay? But if you get down real low and shoot the starfish from the side, then you see this, which is totally different look. So it pays to kind of, you know, look at your subject from different angles and sort of see, you know, how you can best shoot that to give some interest. So, and you know, maybe people don't like these kind of photos. Maybe people like this one better than this one. I don't know, but it is just a different photo, although it's the same subject and the same part of the subject even. And here's my wife's cousin, Daisuke Suzuki. He's from Japan. And again, you sort of, your eyes just follows the edge of this mound of coral on the wall here, and it ends up right at Daisuke's face. And it's just kind of framed in here between these soft corals. And luckily he kind of has a big face, so he sticks out. But anyway, it's just a real simple idea of how that flow works in the photo. And again, there's another image where your eye kind of travels around the edge of that sponge and kind of, you know, encircles or frames the fish itself, you know, so you don't miss them, which you're not going to probably. And I wrote an article in a newsletter recently, a couple months ago, about the small things and taking pictures of details of subjects. And this is one of the examples. It may have been in the newsletter, I don't remember, but it's a crinoid, obviously. But, you know, with the curving of the arms, you know, your eye can't help but travel from the left up here down the arm and kind of curve back into the photos. And I kind of like this one. And anemones, they're a whole bunch of leading lines. Sometimes they can help, sometimes they can hurt, because the lines are blown away from your subject. It's not so pleasing. So my favorite anemone fish shots are usually ones where the tentacles are aiming toward the fish, you know, pointing at it saying, hey, look here. You know, all saying, look here. So anyways, And then here is it's not really a line, but it's an area of nothingness that creates the line, basically. Okay, does that make sense? And so your eye just can't help but flow back and forth on this path because you have all these speed bumps everywhere else. Okay, I mean, that's interesting as well, but you definitely have some flow, visual flow going up and down here, covering that fish. And getting to the end here, you know, these little striped catfish, I have quite a few pictures of these guys, and this is one of the ones I like the best because you have a lot of focus going right here in this area where I think the fish kind of look good. A lot of them are making eye contact. But again, to me, my eye is kind of drawn to that area because all these lines are kind of converging here.
And that's a difficult image to get because it's so easy to blow out the around their mouth.
Yeah,
with the light.
And then you got some jumping in front of others. So sometimes you got the ones that are really out of focus and the other ones behind it are in focus. So you just got to be patient usually and kind of get in position and hopefully they cooperate.
They're very good for photographing for repetitious compositions as well, because they tend to all point in the same direction usually.
They're a lot of fun to shoot. I really like shooting them. These are big ones. You know, they come in. I don't know if they're all the same species or some are younger and older or they're different species or what, but you know, these are the larger ones. They're maybe like 6 or 8 inches long. So just a little recap. Leading lines help provide depth and movement in your image. Use the lines to lead your viewer eye to a primary point of interest or focal point. And you know, your humans' eyes want lines. So when they look at a photo, they are drawn to these lines in the photos. So they can be really effective at, you know, directing the viewer's attention through that photo. And by utilizing properly, you can really improve your images. So your mission is to find these lines, incorporate them into your future images. So one of these days, when it's not 12 degrees or whatever, get out there and go make some new images with leading lines.
Yay.
That's about it. Anybody have any questions?
Very nice, David.
Very good.
Thanks.
Presentation. Thank you.
Nice photos. The top side ones are really good also.
Well, thanks.
I like those.
Yeah, just a question. Why did you decide to shoot so much of the Temple of Heaven and stuff like that in black and white? Because they're quite pretty. And
the sky is really overcast, cloudy. Well, they call it bad weather.
Yeah.
Which means pollution.
Yeah, I know.
And so on those, I convert to black and white. And I've done a whole. I'm working on a black and white photo book in China because I've been in China. I probably spent 2 months in China, and so I have 10,000 images from China. And I'm just making a book to give to some friends and stuff like that, and to my kids. I have 2 daughters adopted from China, and so I just thought it'd be a nice thing for them. So I have a lot of conversions I've done to black and white. So I just threw some of those in. And also I think that by taking the color out, when we're talking about leading lines, it makes you focus more on the lines than on the color that you may see in the image.
And why on your top side, why do you choose to use a fisheye? I almost never pull that out of that.
No, I don't frequently use a fisheye, but sometimes it's fun to do and it makes you do different things. And I thought when we were at Petrified Forest, it just called for it. I don't know why. And I have some really cool pictures of my kids standing on the logs and some of the scenes, you know, the background with the fisheye. And when you center the horizon in the fisheye, it doesn't look so crazy, you know, but when you have the horizon up here to thirds, you know, it's all wonky looking. But anyway, it's just sometimes to do things like that.
So David, have you ever seen a clear blue sky in Beijing?
I have.
I have.
Yeah.
I did one time, but it was just after a cold front blows through.
Right.
Yeah, that's one time was that. And then another time, you know, I was there, it was in the summer, we just gotten in, and one day, and I went up to Coal Hill, which is the big hill that looks over the Forbidden City. And you could barely see the Forbidden City. It was terrible. And then the next day a front blew through it. It was totally blue sky. And I ran up that hill again and took some awesome pictures of Forbidden City from up on top of the hill. So you can get lucky, but it's pretty rare. But it's not pollution, it's bad weather. So anyways, I'm done.
All right. Thanks.
Sure thing.
Drive carefully.
Well, thanks. Hopefully we won't have any problems.
Dennis, you're muted.
I had to unmute here before I share.
Okay.
Am I on now?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Okay. My topic is on negative space, and you can see some of it here. Kilroy is surrounded by two different types of negative space here. And so let's talk about, well, what is negative space? Well, in effect, it's just everything that isn't the positive space. It's an area that surrounds the main subject in your image. And your positive space is the subject, the main subject. It is surrounding the object, but it is not part of it. If you have an identifiable object in the frame, it's the opposite of that. It helps to define the boundaries of your positive space, the boundaries of your subject. You can use negative space, and artists and photographers do it all the time. They use negative space to frame the subject, to put it to where that's the only thing that the eye focuses on. It gives subjects much more visual impact. And the reason that it does that is because when you have a lot of clutter around something, your eye tends to move around in the frame. And so the idea or the story that you're trying to tell, the action in the film, gets diffused away from what you're really trying to do as an artist or a photographer. So it gives your subjects more visual impact. You can use negative space to manipulate a subject. If you put the negative space to the top and the left and your subject to the right, then you get a slightly different feel than if you put it dead center or on the bottom center or the top center. So you can use it to move your subject around a bit to give a different emotional impact. In rare cases, you can actually use negative space as the subject. This is not normal. So the variations, I call it classic negative space, which is usually like classic black or white or some kind of solid color. The Chinese and the Japanese, especially the minimalists in the art world, tend to use negative space, especially like white negative space, predominantly in their art. From my standpoint, I blur the lines between classic negative space and total clutter. I think that some textural elements can be present in negative space, but you want to minimize the definable elements in it, because if you have definable elements in a frame that are not relevant or related to the subject, they tend to be a distraction. It takes the eye away from what you're trying to convey, the images, the emotions, the action, the story that you have in your photograph or your art. Typically, out of focus backgrounds oftentimes can be used as very good negative space. Even if you have definable elements in the background, if you fuzz it out too much by being out of focus, it serves as a good background. And there is a relationship between negative space and what is called bokeh. And the pronunciation of bokeh is bokeh, bokeh, bokeh. I've come to think of it as bokeh, as in like Ken. That's what they typically call it. But they can be complementary, and oftentimes they share qualities between negative space and bokeh. Negative space can be all-encompassing. It can take most of the entire screen, or it can be very, very small, and it depends on the subject. Depends on what you're looking at. I also think that repetitive elements can be considered negative space to some extent, as long as they don't detract from the overall subject that we're looking at. As I said, positive space is the main subject. It is the action in the photo. It's a focus in the image. It is what the artist or the photographer is using to visualize their image, to tell the story. Okay, here's a classic example of negative space and positive space. You may not be able to see it all, but if you're viewing black as your negative space, what you're looking at, you're seeing a vase in the center. If white becomes the negative space to your eye, then you see two grumpy old men looking at each other. So there's a relationship between them, and they can switch roles. Vasarely, he had two zebras here, and he inverted the colors in this lithograph, and you can see you get different feelings between the white negative space and the black negative space, but it's the same image, just inverted. Now, here is a friend of mine that I went to high school with, Craig Edwards, and they've been putting up with this ice storm up there in the Panhandle. And he sent me some of his images a while back, and I really thought of this one as being very much a minimalist picture with a great negative space. In this case, the negative space is a featureless off-white. So you have this very Chinese, Japanese minimalist image here. Compositional elements, not much. So I really like this image. I'm glad that he let me do it. Now, this one is my friend Lou Lindsay, who is here. Say hello, Lou. And I believe this was shot in Hawaii. And it's an excellent example of silhouette. In fact, it's like a classic example of a silhouette. The negative space in the background, the clouds are not really out of focus, but they're diffuse. And so this is an example of a non-classical negative space where you have some textural elements in the background, but they're not distracting, they're actually adding, because the mood of this picture is, okay, I'm capturing this right before sunrise or sunset, or right before sunset, or right after sunrise. So it gives a lot of emotional impact to this picture, I think. Very nice. Here is a case where you have all of this almost black background. It's a deep bluish purple. It's framing this little blenny that's poking its head out through this rusty pipe. And so this is a case where the negative space is using to frame your object, your subject, the blenny. Classic negative space. Here it is, deep at night, 400 feet of water below us, and you see this octopus. So there's nothing but black in the background. You can actually see the black through his transparent body. Very effective. Your eye only has one place it can go. Same here. This jellyfish, probably taken the same night. And the black background is being viewed through the jellyfish as well. Ctenophore, I think, is what it's referred to. Comb jellyfish. Now you start swinging away a little bit from the classic sense that you no longer have a totally featureless background. There's some textural elements in the background, but this worm is flapping around. I'm using a macro lens, 55, well, actually a zoom lens, 55 millimeter, but I'm so close to it that even though I'm shooting at f/14, the background is very fuzzy. If there had been elements in the background that were identifiable, like coral and things like that, it would have been detracting to the subject matter. Here, this little flying worm in the shot. Moving even further away from classic negative space, you have this little crab, soft coral crab. If I'm shooting down on him, you don't even see him because he is so well camouflaged. But putting him against a somewhat featureless background allows you to see what he is and to understand and appreciate his ability to camouflage himself by looking like what he's living on. Okay, there are definable elements in the background here. You see these coral arms in here and the negative space. So at shooting at f11, even though I'm very close to this shot here, you can still see the elements in the background. I think it still qualifies as negative space, but it's moving away from it a bit. Here's another example. You have this little whipped coral crab, and the background here is very out of focus. I'm still at f11, but I'm so close to it, and I'm using a 100mm macro lens, which has got a narrow focus depth of field associated with it. In the background, you see these out of focus little blobs back here that are classic bokeh. This is where the light coming through the iris of the lens is being fuzzed out into these circles. A classic example of bokeh. Now, what do you think of this one right here? Is it negative space or not? Certainly you have no problem seeing this sweet lips as a fish. In fact, your eye really can't go anywhere but him. You do have some distracting elements back here. You have the coral, you have this other coral over here. In the background, you have the swarm of bait fish in the background. They're all dark. And so I'm able to isolate my subject against a rather complex background. So it's a strange negative space example. Now, taking just a few seconds later or earlier, you see this one. There's no negative space here, but I'm still focused on the fish. You can still see him. I call it an inverted negative space example here. And yet there almost isn't any negative space, but it's interesting. You compare this image with this, you get totally different feeling for almost the same identical photograph, but it's not. Like Craig's photograph of the icy bushes and grass, you can have white as a good negative space as well. White or bright works. Here you have the darker fish looking away, and you have this white background, this off-white background, and it serves pretty well as a negative space. Here, you have a very tiny negative space. If that background wasn't dark, you would not really be able to pick out this Clark's anemone fish amongst the tentacles of this anemone. But here it is. It helps to frame this little guy. Little bitty negative space. I like this also because the leading lines here, just like David was saying before, the tentacles, the arms of this anemone are all pointing to my subject. Okay, there's just enough room for this hawkfish to survive here. You have a little bit of negative space here that's framing him. And then you have this green cup coral, this luscious green cup coral that is helping to provide the frame for him. You don't have to have the entire frame composed of negative space, just enough so you're not confusing the issue. I like this one, and yet the divers in the background are confusing my eyes. Subject matter is this child's trike that they've thrown off of the pier, and it's being grown in tunicates and encrusting coral and stuff like that. But you have this white in the foreground that's a nice negative space, and you have this bluish green background that's a good negative space as well. But
I
you have
have a question.
confusing elements here. Yeah, go ahead, Sage.
On the sandy bottoms, is that something that you look for to like create a photo with negative space? Is that normally a place for negative space if there's not things going on in the sand right there?
Yeah, I think so, Sage. I think that you just kind of have to be motoring along, and then you see a subject and you kind of put yourself in an artist mode, and you say, okay, how can I compose this? And you start taking shots, and you move around, and you try different things, and eventually you get back home and you start looking at your photos, and you say, okay, well, this one right here, if I had waited 15 seconds or moved a little bit and got the divers out of the background, I would have ended up with something like this.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Now, my eye is not being confused by these divers down here. It doesn't tend to wander off. There are a few other elements in here, the architectural elements, but they don't bother me like the divers did.
Dennis?
Because they're identifiable.
Dennis?
Yes.
It's Lou. The thing that I like about the diver, and I'm not a underwater photographer, but I think in the perspective of man-made, the tricycle is man-made. And because of that, you have this, it looks like some sort of an oxygen canister sticking up, and the tricycle points me down, and then the oxygen tank points me up, and the diver points me in back to the tricycle. So somehow I love the diver because he's man and so is the tricycle, that symbol.
You know, I'm not disagreeing with you, because I like this photograph right here.
Yeah.
I've always liked at it, and it was a very sandy condition. And I think that's actually a beer bottle down here.
Yeah.
But
okay. Well, that's
from a
still
standpoint of classic from the negative space standpoint,
Mhm.
this is much better negative space. And if you're looking at trying to focus on a single element, tire here,
Yeah.
this becomes more effective in that respect. But from a story standpoint, you're right. There is a story to be told here.
Yeah,
There's a relationship between people and here. What do you think, Barry?
I thought you'd set your beer bottle down and take the picture.
Yeah, right.
That's a nice one.
I like the diver.
I think that this is a good example. I mean, comparing with and without distracting elements. And even though the distracting elements might be related to two, it's a totally different impact when you see this versus this.
Oh, definitely. Definitely that.
I
But
like it
would
as
not-
an example. I like it
Right.
as an example.
But Dennis, we have to also mention that removing things or adding things is not allowed in the contest.
Yes, that's correct. Absolutely correct. You can't get in there and get rid of them like I did. It took me a while to do this.
But you can't get rid of me anyway.
Yeah, I know. That is you, and I'm pretty sure it is.
Yeah.
That was in Raja Ampat, and that was one of the best dives I think I've ever been on. Absolutely.
Do you
Okay.
remember exactly where you were for that, Dennis?
Yeah, I can't. I know what it was. It was a pier. I have it in my logbook. I can tell you where it is.
So I got the little kids, right?
Yeah, where you got the little kids diving off and giving you gang signs in the middle of the water.
Yeah, that was over at Mucky Mosque, I think.
No, that was Mucky Mosque is in Alor. This is up in Raja Ampat.
We were getting the kids in Alor.
No, this is another one, Craig. This is another one.
Oh.
But this is with the Reeds and David and Dennis and myself.
Okay, I wasn't there.
No.
Is it near the pier where all the giant clams are?
Yes.
Okay. Been there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't
Yeah.
see the bicycle though.
I'll send you the location. It's in my logbook.
And it has a beautiful soft coral on the legs of the pier.
All right, well, now here is a situation where you have a beautiful bluish
Diagram.
complex negative space here. The looking into the sun. And what I like about it, okay, it's a pretty decent job of doing a silhouette of Tom and this wreck in Truck Lagoon. But one of the things that I find striking about this is the limited visibility looking off into the distance where this hull, this superstructure, is gradually fuzzing out and eventually it becomes negative space. And I like this. I like this because it gives depth and I think that it helps tell a story. I've always liked this shot, even if it is of Tom. Okay, I don't know that I can do a better wide angle shot than I did on this one right here. And I like the aspect of the negative space here because the blue background here allows me to focus on the action in the photograph. This line of fish coming down from top right to bottom left. And you can actually see it through the sea fan right here. Beautiful color combinations of the yellows and the reds and the greens and the blues and everything else. The negative space is essential to this photograph. If I'm off to the left shooting in from over here into this, I don't get the same impact. I lose a lot. So positioning yourself to give your photograph the ability to isolate the action using the negative space is very important. Here is one where, okay, you can say there is no negative space here, but the background is such a repetitive background and it's a contrasting color. The little panda anemone fish here is the subject. This is really not a distraction as much as it is something else that puts this panda fish in his environment.
Hey, Dennis, can you
Yes.
go about a little faster? We about 5 minutes
Okay,
more, maybe.
good.
And
Yeah, I will. Okay, negative space. David looked at this and he called it negative space, and I think it is in a way. You see the reddish area, and yet you have a lot of elements in here that are mirroring the elements on the little guy here. And here is a complex negative space example where it goes from dark to light, and then you have some elements back in here. This is a example of negative space is basically too flat. It's a great subject, but it's not a great photograph because you're too flat here. Now, I have a great subject. This guy has snagged himself lunch, and I didn't realize it before, but the background is too junky. And so, good subject, not a good photograph. Same here.
Question,
This
Dennis.
is too confusing.
Question,
Yeah.
Dennis, on the one before that. I was looking through some of my ghost ornate pipefish, and practically the only way that I could get one in good negative space is to kind of maneuver it with my finger. But I hate doing that. I hate manipulating the wildlife.
Yeah.
And I especially hate it when they do it on like a wildlife safari when they're trying to make, an animal move in a certain location.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to briefly talk about bokeh. And it is a Japanese term for the aesthetic quality of the blur produced in out of focus parts of an image. To be able to get good bokeh, you need to have a very shallow depth of field. You need to set up close to your subject in most cases. And you need to have some smaller, bright objects in the background for it to work. Typical camera setup would be to have a macro or a zoom lens somewhere between 60 and 105. Shoot at a wider aperture, 2.8 to 8 or so, and then just enough whatever else to get the good exposure. This is a classic example right here where you can see that the depth of field from the shoulder back to about here is in focus, but as you move further away, it's out of focus. Obviously shot with a low aperture like 2.8 or f4. The background, you have these spots of light that now are turning into a pattern. It is a reflection of how the light goes through the iris on it. Here is a case where the sparkler and the kid's gloved hand are the subjects, but the bokeh in the background is equally as important. It becomes like subject 1 and subject 2. A case right here where I'm shooting at f11, but I'm extremely close with a 100mm macro lens, and you can see in the background the out of focus spots here. So the negative space is made up of these little dots of light, and that's bokeh. The rhinophore and the ruffle are the only things that are in focus here. Another classic example shot, another again, 100mm macro lens, the Canon 50D at f.6.3, and you can see the spots of light in the background that give it visual interest. And again, shooting at f9, I'm getting a little bit more definable areas in the bokeh, but you can see it. Here, you really don't have it. I'm shooting at f16. You can see the element in the background, but it's a very lush negative space here, and there's a lot of action. Here is an inverted bokeh. I'm focused on the coral grouper in the background, and the coral in the foreground is all out of focus and doing its bokeh thing. F14, I'm moving away. Everything is definable here. It's a great shot and a pretty decent negative space, but I'm not going to call it a good example for bokeh. And here, no bokeh. F22, I think, F20, I was using it. And the background elements here are not only they're still unfocused enough to be definable. And again, it's one of these cases of, it's a great subject, but not a really great photograph. Okay, and that does it for me. Stop share. How'd I do?
Really nice.
Good job, Dennis.
Great examples, Dennis. Thanks a lot. Let's postpone general questions if we can. Martin, you're up next, and so let's go into that. Martin's going to tell us how to be successful in submitting photos to the photo contest, and then after he's done, we'll just open the floor up and talk about what we've seen, if that's okay.
Okay. I just wanted to have just 2 slides here, so we shouldn't be too long. Let me share it. Okay, so just wanted to go over the topics. This is just a copy of what's online in the contest rules of the themes. So we're as we've been talking a lot here about leading lines, long and thin, silhouettes, single color. I think we've had a good discussion about all of those and what they mean and what they don't mean and what might be good candidates and what might not. So I'm not going to dwell on that. What I also wanted to go through is some things that maybe people are not familiar with the rules that are in the contest, but or whatever, but I haven't really been enforcing these too much, but I've been editing them myself. So if you submit photos that don't meet these rules, your photo will be edited before the judges see it. And that happens every month. So just to be aware, I do need something like a name on a photo, like whose photo that is, because when all the photos come in and they go in the big bucket, if I don't have your name on it, I have to stop. Some people send me photos that say image 1, image 2, image 3, which I don't know whose photo that is. So I have to go back and try to find whose photo that is and put a name on it. Or some people send me their name on every photo, but they don't have a number. The only numbers can be 1, 2, or 3. Some people say whatever, 25, 16, and 8 or something, but in the database, it has to be a 1, 2, or 3. So I just want to emphasize that. The other thing is file size. I get a lot of photos where people send me that are multiple megabytes, and it chews up a lot of space and email and all this kind of stuff. The rules state you cannot send anything over 1 megabyte. So if you send me something more than that, I will downsize it before the judges ever see it. So there's no point in sending me anything bigger than that. Also on the resolutions, it's 1920 pixels with the horizontal wide direction, and 1080 pixels with the horizontal high direction, because that's what people's screens are. That's what the projector is when we show these at HUPS at Bayland, and that's the rules for these photos. And every single month I get people that exceed those, and I have to go in and edit them. Okay.
I have a question on the resolution.
Okay.
If you're keeping it below one of those, but you don't actually have it in the 16 by 9 format, is that still okay? Or do you want everything in a 16?
You have to meet both of those. So whichever
meet
one,
them or be below them.
You can be at that size, but
Okay.
nothing bigger than that. And so what happens if you send me something that is whatever 1080 by 1920? Well, then it will get cropped down to, it's not cropped, it'll get resized to where whichever one I have to meet that. So, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, Sage, the only really controlling, and I've run this for the photo contest for years, but the only real constraint is the 1080 high, because that is what the HD resolution is working with. It can be 640 by 1080, or it can be, you can have whatever you want, but the vertical dimension is I would say that
The
is a
most
constraint.
restrictive. The vertical is the most restrictive, but still, I don't want a 3000 by 1000, because that's too wide of pixels. And so I have to go in and edit it then.
Sure.
So
but if
Sage,
you had like
the
a
short answer to
1500 by 10.
Yeah. So it doesn't have to be that aspect ratio.
Okay.
Short answer to your question was yes, Sage. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
And so we get a lot of vertical, photos, but yeah, so long as neither dimension is exceeded by those numbers.
Can you talk about what the rules are concerning manipulating your photo?
Yes, I can talk about that too. So we talked about that briefly when Dennis was there with his thing that he removed. Those kind of edits are specifically not allowed. So the kind of edits that you can do is you can do global changes, like take the entire photo and make it brighter or darker, or up the contrast, or change the color cast, or anything like that, so long as it's a global thing. What you cannot do is things where you go in and isolate a part of the photo, and I want to brighten this area. Okay. You cannot brighten an area or something like that. You have to brighten the entire photo. Okay. You cannot go and do masking or things where you would take the little brush and go in and I just want to brighten his face here, that kind of thing. You cannot do local edits. It's only global edits. And so you cannot go in and just remove this part of the photo or take the fish and put him on a better background or anything like that. That's a local edit. You're taking part of the photo and changing it.
What about when you get rid of backscatter?
Backscatter is the one thing that is allowed that you can do as a local edit. Okay, you can go in and remove all of the backscatter, but if there's a little fish in the way, you can't remove the little fish or remove the divers.
Sharpening is also allowed, but you have to be careful on that. Don't over sharpen things.
Yes. And so all of those, so long as you're doing it to the entire photo, it's allowed. You cannot go in and just do a mask over just this area and I want to brighten just this part, or just sharpen this part. You can't do that kind of stuff.
But to your question, it's tough, and Martin should get specific questions about that, because, for example, the sharpening tool that a lot of people would use, the unsharp mask, has a mask in it. So, but we allow that. So it's a little bit confusing in that regard.
Yeah. So I
But it's
think
a one button type of thing. So in a sense, it's a global control.
yeah.
Well, no, but you control the mask. So I guess we have disagreements about that. Anyway, the thing is, it is allowed.
I have another question about the categories, because you've got novice, intermediate, advanced. How do I know which category I fall into?
Everybody usually starts with novice unless they've been doing a lot of photography or they're a professional and selling their photos or something like that. But usually people will start in novice, and if you get too good for novice, you'll get bumped up.
Okay.
And that has happened. That's some people have submitted and we say, whoa, 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 this person's not a novice, and they'll get bumped up.
Or you only stay a year and you get bumped up like Justin.
Well, no, it's not stay a year. You have to win the photographer of the year for that category.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's what
Yeah,
he
although I think that we have had cases where somebody who started off in novice, and because we didn't really know what their quality characteristics were.
But it is because you are so good, you get bumped up. It's not staying a year. There's a lot of people that have been a novice for years, and a lot of people have been an intermediate for years. So it's not just being there for a year. You have to show that you really need to go up.
There's been a couple that's been in there for months and that's it. And then they get moved.
Yeah.
They're just too good.
If you're obviously that good
If
and
you're
you have a
obviously
lot
in
of
the wrong category.
sheepskins,
Yeah, we want it to
you
be a
can
fair
actually,
contest.
we've actually started people in the advanced category before, just
Yeah.
because we know that they don't belong in intermediate or novice.
Well, the only place I've ever entered anything is in art galleries. It's never been for this type of competition, so I had no idea where I would qualify.
Okay, well, just send it as novice. I mean, that's the easiest category. That's where you want to be if you can. And if we say no, well, then we'll move you. But so anyway, oh, and one other thing on the resolution is I see pictures sometimes where they, whatever, they're trying to get a subject of this little fish, and they want to get it as where the subject takes up most of the photo, and they will crop the photo down, and they will have something much less than 1920 by 1080. It'll be maybe 600 by 400. And you can submit that photo, but when the judges see it, they're going to see it as a little tiny photo on their screen. If they're looking for things 1020 by 1080, or if they blow it up, it's going to look very pixelated. So be careful if you're sending things very much smaller than this resolution. Okay.
Yeah, I definitely dock points off for low resolution, fuzzy looking images.
Right. And we've seen that several times. And sometimes, you know, I try to fix them for people, but it's really tough. The data is just not there on those small pictures like that.
Yes.
Okay. The other thing I want to talk about is the photo submission. I've been very lax on that. I really want people to try to send it to the Google Groups, and that's the link that I put in every reminder. Try to send it to Google Groups, because the reason that is, and some people just respond to the email, they send them to me, they know my email, that kind of stuff, and I've been accepting that. But now for the upcoming contest, the reason we had to change the date is because of that. Because I'm not going to be around when the deadline comes, and some of the people only ever send their photos to me, and now their photos won't be in the contest unless I move the date. Okay, so that's the reason we have the link, is so I can just point the link to somebody else to take over in my absence, and then everything's fine. All the photos go to the other person. But because there's a lot of people that just send them directly to me, I can't do that. And so their photos will just be lost because I won't be able to have email for a week. But so these are the things that I'm just kind of harping on because they've been problems, and they started off as little problems, and it was a person here or there, but these things here have all become bigger and bigger issues that I'm spending a ton of time fixing every single month. So I want to mention these things here, and I'm going to start putting these in the email reminders also for people. just to remind them. And if you have any questions about this, like you don't know how to change the name of the image file, or you don't know how to change it so it's under 1 megabyte, or you don't know how to change the resolution, just, email, me or Dennis or whoever. People can help you figure out how to fix those things. And there's lots of stuff online about how to do that also. And it depends on which tool are you using. If you're using Lightroom or Photoshop or some other tool. So some of this stuff you can change just in Windows. You don't even have to have an editor. Okay, any other questions?
Yeah, you're doing a great job, Martin.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so.
Well, we're getting close to the end of the workshop time, but we've got time for questions. Any other subjects that people want to bring up, or more comments about the various stuff we saw?
Can I ask a question? I know that some of you are in the contest, and I've been providing a lot of comments. Are you getting the comments on your contest images?
Yes, I will tell you, every person gets every comment every time.
Yeah, I thought they did.
Yes,
Are they
it's
helpful?
very much appreciated. Yes, definitely.
Well,
Not that I ever hardly ever submit, but yes.
It's the only way you can learn is to have that critique, so you get better.
Right.
Well,
I had no idea that was a thing yet, and now I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm not trying to beat anybody down with my comments, but I'm trying to be objective about them as much as possible. There's going to be something good in almost everything I see, but there's going to be some things that could be improved as well.
And Dennis doesn't provide all the comments. So if there's something there you don't like, don't necessarily get on him. Some of the other judges provide comments too.
Yeah, and I may be wrong about my perception. And I like to point this out in other composition workshops that I've had before, is that there are no hard set rules on composition and what somebody likes and what they don't like. It's a very subjective thing. When somebody looks at something and they like it, I think that they should do themselves the favor of asking, well, okay, I like this. What is it about this that I like? Do your job, figure it out, and learn something in the process.
Well, something that I've learned also is go to every photo contest. It's all published out there on hups.org, and look at all the photos and try to look at them and say, well, why did this photo not win? And see if you can figure out why, and look at the ones that did win. And there's good reasons why they won. A lot of the stuff we've been talking about, and see if you can figure out, well, why did that photo win and not that one?
Yeah, my particular, I think that one of my biggest bonus points I would get is somebody that is able to convey a very compelling story with their photograph. That's probably one of the most difficult things to do well. And that's my particular feelings about images.
I was, for this last contest, I was looking at my pictures back to 2010. And two things I realized: one, I took a heck of a lot of crappy pictures. But two, I was shooting the Olympus 4040, which had like about a minute digital delay. And I actually got a picture that I liked. That used to be a terrible camera.
Well, further on to Dennis's remarks, this is art, and you got to remember that art evolves, and whenever people come up with new stuff in art, usually they get trashed for their entire career for it. So don't feel bad if somebody's, saying they don't like your work. You could be the next Picasso.
Yeah, there are a lot of people out there that like Jackson Pollock.
You don't?
I do. Actually, I do like his stuff.
Underwater images.
Stravinsky caused a riot the first time they played and performed The Rite of Spring.
Yeah, The Rite of Spring.
A literal riot, actually. Yeah,
that's right. People they hated him in Paris.
Yeah. So there you go.
Perspective
really-
changes.
Really great photos. Good workshop.
Excellent workshop.
Yeah, very
So
good.
the mail just arrived. I have an unveiling. What do you think? You guys like my new glasses?
Oh yeah, you look, yeah.
A work
You
of
don't,
art.
you don't need glasses very much, do you?
Oh no, I need them all the time. They just the last pair I bought are so uncomfortable. I can't even wear them. So I had to buy another pair.
Yeah, you don't have a big diopter on, or I would see the distortion of your eyes.
You know, it's not the prescription. The last frames were so small that I couldn't see anything below here in focus. It was either too small or too big. So I went for the too big now.
Let me
Okay,
ask
well,
a
since
serious
you-
question here before we get too far away, and it's fine when we talk whatever we want. But so we've sort of got this penciled in for another workshop somewhere in the summer that would try to cover the second half of the year. And again, the idea is to get some presentations. Do people think it's worth doing, or
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
one and done, or what?
Yeah.
Okay.
And to be honest with you, I definitely like the Zoom aspect.
Yeah.
It worked out really well in this one, especially.
Saves on gasoline.
I appreciate it. It saves me a lot of gasoline.
Well, and it allows us to see things up close and as sharp as possible on our own
Yeah,
machine.
that's
that
correct.
you don't get when you're sitting in a room.
That's correct.
In Barry's case,
I
he'd
just
have to be
worry about
buying.
the participation and being able to jump in. I mean, today's group was small enough that I think that worked out okay. If we had 40 or 50 people tuning in, we'd probably need somebody watching, asking people to raise their hands and stuff like that. So
Yeah, monitor,
yeah.
or you everybody can put their questions into the chat,
yeah,
and then the monitor can ask the questions for all of us.
yeah, we could do that if the groups get larger. Yeah, but I think this
Okay.
worked out okay.
This has been excellent, guys. I've been seeing things for decades that I've enjoyed and not realized that bokeh was the name for it.
Oh, wow. No,
Yeah.
it's not bokeh. It's bokeh.
Bokeh, bokeh.
Okay, bokeh.
Well, actually, in our practice leading up to this, that's the thing I asked Dennis to sort out was, how do you say this damn word? And
It's like
Martin,
Ed.
and Martin
Bokeh.
went out and found one on the internet where you could play it back how to say it, and it's like a bouquet of flowers. So
Okay.
that's the official internet. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know. But
Yeah,
nobody
well,
lies on
I
that.
heard something different, but okay.
So
I heard
you
it.
say
I took
tomato
a-
and I'll say tomato.
They
Yeah.
did a class for us where we actually took black construction paper and made our own. And you could put like Mickey Mouse face ears, and your whole bokeh in the background would be like little Mickey Mouse heads. It was quite interesting.
Well, most of the bokeh that I get is accidental bokeh. I just happen to be set up correctly, and then when I get it back in and I start looking at it, it says, "Oh yeah, look at there. I didn't mean to do it, but there it is."
Well, the cool thing about macro is that you're going to get that no matter what, especially on the micro 4/3. When you shoot macro and super macro, the difference in the depth of field from f 2.8 up to f16 is like maybe an eighth of an inch. So
I've been seeing
Yeah.
a lot of this like pastel macro photography on Instagram and just online, and I understand that it has something to do with the lighting being completely from the back and from the front, so you wash out everything, but it seems to have a lot of that bokeh quality to it as well. And I'm not asking anybody how to do it right now because I'm sure it's involved, but it's very striking to me looking at the undersea pictures that are completely pastel.
Yeah,
Well, they've
I
got some
like
new
it.
lenses too. There's a new kind of a probe lens that's a really funny looking thing that lets you do super macro, really close up, but infinite depth of field too. So there is some stuff out there like that.
Okay.
But just your general telephoto lens is going to have a very narrow depth of field. So, and the same with the
The other
macro.
thing about bokeh is the quality of the lens also has an impact on how the quality of the bokeh that you get. The higher quality lenses will give you a more pleasing pattern, especially if you get the really cheap lenses that only have like 6 leaves and things like that. Instead of getting round patterns, you're going to get a lot of little hexagons all over the background.
Oh,
But Dennis, there's
kind of like
some,
a cheap dive light.
there's some lenses that are, going around now, made in the 60s in East Germany, for example. People just go crazy to buy them because they were cheap and because they get a certain type of this thing with the big teardrops and pearl drops and stuff like that. So yeah, it's quite a thing. And, I think it's a whole school of photography on that and what kind of lens and so on.
Well, I mean, art is in the eye of the beholder, basically, and it's very subjective.
Yeah.
Now, it's interesting. I think Martin would make a comment as well. Is that when he's looking at and I've seen this happen before, is that when I'm looking at the contest that was, and I was not judging it, but taking care of it, I would see a variety of judges. Sometimes I'd see disparities from like 3 to 8 or 3 to 9 on the same image. But there are some images that always get 9s or always get 3s. So it's the ones that everybody seems to be able to agree upon is that have a universal appeal.
Well, I'm gonna run, guys. Great.
Right.
Presentation.
I'm gonna run.
See ya. Thank you.
Me too.
Bye.
Gotta go take care of the pipes. Thank you.
All right, hope to see your stuff. Bye.
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 Bye.